Well, good evening. My name is Rachel Rosengard. As most of you already know, I'm the Assistant Director here at Thayer Memorial Library. Thank you for coming out for our program, Lafayette, More Than a Rock Star. Just like John, Paul, George, and Ringo did 60 years ago, the Marquis de Lafayette took our country by storm. As you know, he became a hero during the American Revolutionary War and a national celebrity when he returned to America decades later during his farewell tour. 2024 puts the Marquis back in the spotlight as we commemorate the 200th anniversary of his farewell tour and his visit to Lancaster in September 1824. Thayer Memorial Library welcomes Evie and Peter from the American Friends of Lafayette. They join us tonight to present Lafayette, More Than a Rock Star, a look back at the Marquis' life and times in the newly formed United States. Before you leave tonight, please be sure to sign our guest book in the back of the room, and do join us again on Tuesday, September 3rd at 9 a.m. as the American Friends of Lafayette, Thayer Memorial Library, First Church of Lancaster Unitarian Universalist, a color guard, and more reenact outside on the town green in real time General Lafayette's 1824 stop in Lancaster. And with that, I will hand it over to the General.
Thank you. Hi, so my name is Pete Reilly, as noted, and I dress this way as in order to portray a typical gentleman of 1824 rather than Lafayette himself, although sometimes I'm mistaken for him. But we'll get going. On July 25th, 1824, Salem Town Jr. of Charlton, Mass. wrote to his wife about the expected reception of Lafayette in Boston. There never was now, nor will be, such a meeting in this or any country. Reflecting on the tour a few years later, Edward Everett wrote that it was an event taken in all its part, unparalleled in the history of man. Hezekiah Niles wrote, "The volumes of history furnish no parallel. No one like Lafayette has ever reappeared in any country." Lafayette didn't hold any political office, any of those sort of things. He was the surviving Major General of the American Revolution because he'd been a Major General when he was 19, but he didn't hold any great power or anything. It was a reflection on what he had done. When word of Lafayette's upcoming visit came out, Mayor Quincy of Boston wrote to Lafayette inviting him to come to Boston. Lafayette responded, "Whatever port I first attain, I shall with the same eagerness hasten to Boston and present its beloved, revered inhabitants as I have the honor to offer it to the City Council and to you, sir, with homage of my affectionate gratitude." And Lafayette was actually he actually followed through on that promise. He arrived on Staten Island on August 15th, and Evie and I were down on Staten Island this August 15th, and came into Manhattan to a tremendous reception, and we rode the boat over with him from Staten Island to Manhattan. The reception wasn't quite as tremendous in 2024, but you know, we're working on it. At any rate, he headed to Boston. Not long, he left for Boston after only a few days, and crossed the border into Massachusetts on August 23rd, which is just a week after he left. He was really moving, changing the horses regularly, that type of stuff. He spent the night at what we now call the Shirley Eustis House, which at the time was the home of Eustis, who was the governor of Massachusetts, and then a parade formed to escort him from the Shirley Eustis House to the Boston Common, which was like a 2-mile parade. Huge number of people. It was tremendous. Mayor Quincy addressed him when he came to the city line. Roxbury was not part of Boston then, and addressed him this way. When urged by generous sympathy, you first landed on these shores, you found a people engaged in an arduous and eventful struggle for liberty with apparently inadequate means and amidst dubious omens. After the lapse of nearly half a century, you find the same people, prosperous beyond all hope and all precedent, their liberty secure, sitting in its strength, without fear and without reproach. In your youth, you joined the standard of 3 millions of people raised in an unequal and uncertain conflict. In your advanced age, you return and are met by 10 millions of people, their descendants, whose hearts throng hither to greet your approach and to rejoice in it. This is not the movement of a turbulent populace excited by fresh laurels of some recent conqueror. It is a grave, moral, intellectual impulse. Now, it's worth pausing here for a moment to consider what the state of the world would have appeared to someone involved in the celebration of Lafayette. And this would be somebody who read the newspapers, kept up with affairs. People like yourself, you'd probably check a newspaper or two every day, and following all that information. And we can consider the foreign news section of the Recorder in Greenfield, Mass. On August 17th, 1824. Oh, geez. Go ahead. Got a little out of order there. I'm sorry. Back. No, next one. I'm sorry. We got the slides a little out of order. I'm sorry. We get a summary of what the New York papers have printed from the English and French papers up to June 26th. So information moves at the same rate as people move, and people don't move that fast. So when you're getting the news from Europe, it's kind of stale, but that's just the way it is. There were reports that one of the independent governments of South America is seeking to buy vessels of war in order that they might place their navy on an equal footing with that of Spain. In Spain itself, a decree of amnesty appears to be mere mockery. More French troops were pouring into the country. Now, Ferdinand VII is a constitutional monarch, but he doesn't like being a constitutional monarch, so he's at war with his people, and he's getting backing from Louis XVIII, who's likewise a somewhat constitutional monarch who wants to be an absolute monarch. There's this tendency there's this backwards pressure from the French Revolution to go back to more absolute forms of government. Click forward. No. I'm sorry. Well, that's okay. What? Lord Byron. Do we have Lord Byron? Yeah, okay, good. I'm sorry. There are stories about the fighting for Greek independence. Lord Byron, who had been using his financial resources to aid the revolution against the Ottomans, had died there in April. And now Garrison. An 18-year-old lad in Nantucket would stand in the pouring rain on August 31st, waiting to shake hands with Nantucket. I can't believe I did that. It's not Nantucket. It's another end town. It's Newburyport. It was Newburyport. I apologize. I don't know how that got by me. It was in Newburyport. An 18-year-old lad in Newburyport would stand in the pouring rain on August 31st, waiting to shake hands with Lafayette. Pondering his career choices, he wavered between trying to get into West Point or following Lord Byron's example and fight for the liberty of Greece. Instead, William Lloyd Garrison would found a newspaper called The Liberator in 1831 and helped found the American Anti-Slavery Society. He's probably the most famous white abolitionist. He's not as famous as Frederick Douglass, but his American Anti-Slavery Society, they were shifting to immediate emancipation, with no compensation, whereas kind of the moderate view was the American Colonization Society, which was saying, oh, we should encourage people to liberate their slaves and then put them on a ship to Africa. That was the Monroe's view, for example. Now, to understand the full context of Lafayette's life, you would have to have deeper knowledge of American, French, and general European history than I can ever hope for. But here is how I will sum it up. We want Metternich now. Yeah, good. Lafayette was as close as you can get to being universally popular in the United States of America. There's reasons for this. He's, oddly enough, he's not an American, he's French, which is a big advantage. He hasn't been involved in American politics for the last 40 years, which is, very bitter and divisive, and he's not associated with any region of the country. So in some sense, he's a pure American more than anybody else. Anybody else is involved in American politics and is on one of a couple of sides, or they're associated with a particular region of the country. Lafayette's not, so everybody can unite in greeting Lafayette. So very popular in the United States, in Europe not so much, okay? And this would be a good example is Clemens von Metternich, who becomes the Chancellor of Austria. He was a brilliant foreign policy guy. He's working to make the world safe for absolute monarchy. Henry Kissinger was a great admirer of his. At any rate, on May 28, 1834, he writes in his diary, "Lafayette is dead, too late for the world. I am disgusted to see the Moniteur pronounces a eulogy over him." Metternich referred to the Monroe Doctrine as an indecent declaration. So at any rate, to continue, there was also news that Lafayette would be taking passage to the United States on July 10th. So you got this newspaper on August 17th. He's just arrived in New York, and you're getting the news that he left, that he's going to be leaving on July 10th. So it's, the further thing, go ahead. Oh, there's Lord Byron, okay. Right, there's a notice in the newspaper that says that people refer to him as the Marquis. We all think, you'll all see that a lot, the Marquis de Lafayette, and they're saying that's not correct. He's more or less renounced the title of Marquis. It's something he inherited, he didn't earn, and he prefers to be addressed as General. You'll find in the newspaper accounts during that period that that's how he's generally referred to, as the General. And also in the speeches where he's greeted every place he goes, he'll be referred to as General Lafayette. So it's his status as one of Washington's right hands that is emphasized. Go ahead, next one. Well-informed Americans would be aware of the perilous state of government of the people in the world. There's all these things going against it, and also it's pushing forward. But it's this idea of people governing themselves is not something that's common. But as Sarah Val wrote, more than anyone on earth, Lafayette was mournfully aware of the uniqueness of the American Republic he had fought to build. Right. So people are saying Lafayette is coming, They're all excited. It's possible, if they have a picture in their mind, that this is the picture. This is the young, dashing Marquis that came to America and charmed everybody and fought bravely. And that might have been what somebody has in mind. And that's a common image of Lafayette. That's not what they got. That's what they got. He arrives here. He's going to shortly turn 67. He walks with a limp. He's wearing a hairpiece, and he's pretty stout. But that doesn't seem to bother anybody. Now, next one. Now, the Lafayette enthusiasts are very fond of the rock star metaphor, that because it gives it the enthusiasm that he was received with. That's why people say he's a rock star, and he toured the country. And we even have this T-shirt that you can buy on Lafayette200.org. There's Lafayette with a guitar and a very partial list of the places that he stopped at on his tour. Now, there are two problems with the rock star metaphor. The first is that when Lafayette arrives, he didn't put on a show. Lafayette did not put on a show. The community put on a show for Lafayette. There'd be a big speech from the most eminent person available, and after that speech, Lafayette would say a few words. He'd shake hands and reminisce with the veterans. They'd all remember him, and he'd remember them. He'd kiss the ladies, and he'd tell the militia who'd been doing their maneuvers and stuff for him, and he'd tell the militia he hadn't seen finer troops anywhere. And he just had to show up, really. He didn't make big speeches. He didn't need to. But the second problem with the rock star metaphor is it's really inadequate. Now, Lynn, Massachusetts, on August 31st, captures the high esteem for Lafayette. The most poetically. This is Jonathan White, who was chairman of the Committee of Arrangements. I know nothing else about Jonathan White. Although your present appearance among us, like the transit of a brilliant and beneficent planet commissioned to proclaim goodwill to man, in its rapid career among innumerable worlds, is short and fleeting, the emanations of the bright and glorious light which is shed around you will continue with us to guide our steps and cheer our hearts to the last moment of our existence. And there's truth in this poetry. People would somebody would die in the 1880s having lived a very full life, and it would be included in their obituary that when they were 7 years old, they brought a flower and handed it to Lafayette, or they shook hands with Lafayette, or they were in the crowd that saw him. It was so things. The banner in Lynn that day went even further. Thou gavest us 13 talents. Lo, we have gained 11 more. Receive our gratitude. So they're showing us like, well, you gave us these 13 colonies, and look, we've got 11 more states now. There's 24 states now. Go ahead. Joseph Story was one of the more distinguished speakers and on that rainy day in August 31st. It just rained like crazy. Lafayette was stopping in like 7 towns, and everybody was out for him. Joseph Story had been on the United States Supreme Court since 1811. In 1841, he would write the opinion in United States versus Amistad, which would free 53 Africans who had rose up to take over the ship that they were being illegally transported in. He summarized Lafayette's contribution this way: "Can we forget that we were poor and struggling alone in the doubtful contest for independence, and you crossed the Atlantic at the hazard of fortune and fame to cheer us in our resistance, that you recrossed it to solicit naval and military succors from the throne of France and returned with triumphant success, that your gallantry in the Southern campaign checked the inroads of a brave and confident enemy, that your military labors closed but with the surrender at Yorktown, and thus indissolubly united your name with the proud events of that day. And then we have Reverend Nathaniel Thayer, who addressed Lafayette on September 3rd, out there. It gladdens us that we and our children may behold the man whom we have believed and whom we have taught our children to believe was second only to his and our friend, the immortal Washington. We participate in your joy in beholding our institutions in vigor, our population extended, so that since you left us from a little one, we have become millions, and from a small hand, a strong nation, that you see our glory rising, our republic placed on an immovable basis, all of which are in part, under providence, to be ascribed to your sacrifices, dangers, and toils. Lafayette was not a rock star. He was a superhero. That's how he's being received. It's like he came from this other planet and saved our planet, then went off and did all sorts of other stuff, and now he's just coming back to visit, and we're telling him, hey, you took care of us back then, and we've taken care of ourselves ever since, and it's thanks to the institutions that you helped us found. That's the tenor of the speeches. Now, so this is kind of a contemporary metaphor in a way, and most superheroes you'll find will have an origin story. So we're going to look at the origin story. I draw heavily from Hero of Two Worlds by Mike Duncan, which is a really good, one of the more recent biographies. He's still going around doing book signings. So I mean I've read a number of other biographies, but this is the one I favor. So this is where Lafayette spent his earliest life. Marie Joseph Paul Ives Roch Gilbert du Motier de Lafayette was born in 1757. As a youngster, he went by Gilbert. He spent his early years in Chavignac, far from the center of power at Versailles and Paris. Since I am terrible at French pronunciation, and this is a superhero narrative inspired by a true story, we call it Smallville. He's growing up in Smallville. His father died in the Battle of, his father died in the Battle of Minden in 1759, making Gilbert the Marquis. Yeah, okay, good. His father's family were relatively poor sword nobles, and I'm not going to try and explain the whole French nobility thing, but basically they're nobles by right of their birth, and their function is to fight for the king when required. And the Lafayettes had a long tradition of fighting and dying in battle. And one of his ancestors was actually at the side of Joan of Arc. Go ahead. What do we got next? Or the one before? Right. That's Lafayette's mother. Gilbert's mother, Marie-Louise Jolie de Lavriere, left him with his paternal grandmother and aunts, and back in Smallville, and she went to Paris to live with her grandfather, and she was paving what she's doing, though, is paving the way for Lafayette's future. She was from a much more prestigious family, but I think there may have been a lot of daughters, and you have to pay a dowry for your daughters, so they'll sometimes marry a little down. But then her influence helps the father's military career. That's kind of the way things work. Everything is about who you're connected to. We will sometimes say that's the way it is with us, but they didn't think it was a bad thing. So she left him with the paternal grandmothers, and with the paternal grandmother and some aunts, and that's who's raising him. Gilbert was happy being the young lord of the manor that his grandmother managed. He took his military heritage to heart. Later in life, he remarked, "I can recall no time in my life when I did not love stories of glorious deeds or have dreams of traveling the world in search of fame." That's what he's being raised on. Some of this he's getting from his grandmother, apparently, about this great tradition you have. So he's the lord of the manor. I mean, his grandmother's run everything, but he's the lord of the manor. Everybody has to tip their hat to him. And so he feels responsibility to protect his people. And during this time, in the general region, there was this thing they called the Beast of Gévaudan. And there's all these theories about exactly what it was, but it was killing a lot of people. It was this large animal, different speculations. And there actually was such an animal. Somebody actually shot it. They never figured out they didn't have like biologists and DNA to figure out what it actually was, but it was a real thing. But he felt the responsibility, and he would go out into the woods hunting for the Beast of Gévaudan. He was gonna get it. He was 8 years old. Now, in 1768, Gilbert gets the summons to go to Paris, or as we might call it, Metropolis. And his carefree life as little lord of the manor was over. In Paris, he's not adapted to court life. How you walk, it's how you dance. One time he danced with Marie Antoinette, and she made fun of him. It was terrible. He just didn't have it. He was still dreaming of an active military career, but he's out of place. Less than 2 years later, though, he receives his first superpower. In the month of April 1777, both his mother and his maternal great-grandfather die. Lafayette is now one of the wealthiest aristocrats in Europe and the hottest commodity on the marriage market. Let's see if we go. Okay, this is his mother-in-law to be. Before long, he's engaged to the daughter of Jean-Paul François de Noailles, Duc d'Aillon, Marie Adrienne Francois. And we can go to the next one. That's his fiancée, Adrienne, and Lafayette is 14 and she's 12, and her mother does not really approve of this. They have to wait 2 years before they get married. But Lafayette moves to Versailles, which is really it's not that far from Paris, but that's the real place to be. And at first, Adrienne doesn't know they're engaged. It's just, there's this orphan boy that your father's taking an interest in. Be nice to him. And she falls very much in love with him, and he's very much in love with her, which is not a requirement for a French aristocratic marriage. It's actually kind of odd, but it ends up working out very, very well. So Lafayette's Now, this is his second superpower. He's part of the inner elite. The Noyes family is extremely, extremely influential. And so his father-in-law can get some all these good gigs, gigs in the military, gets him associated with prestigious units. Just roll back to the mother-in-law. Okay. You see the year that she dies? Yeah, that's the terror, okay? She and her sister and a couple of other people all die in the terror. Adrienne barely misses it, and it's because of the influence of Americans saying, look, Robespierre, you know, you're doing what you're doing, we might not like it, but you can't execute Lafayette's wife. At any rate, go ahead. Keep going. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Lafayette's high school buddies include Louis the 16th, Louis the 18th, and Charles the 10th. The next three kings of France. Louis the 17th never actually is crowned king, So he still doesn't fit in. He wants active military service, not the sort of ceremonial role that make up court life. An odd thing about the education of the French elite was that they studied stories about Greek democracy in the Roman Republic while preparing to spend their lives catering to an absolute monarch. All these ideas swirling around made the stirrings of revolution in America of great interest. It was great. Benjamin Franklin was over there, and just people were really fascinated by these people governing themselves. Not to mention, it created a chance to stick it to the British, who had killed his old man. So Louis XVI and his father-in-law forbid Lafayette going to America. It's like, you can't do that. We can't have prestigious people going and fighting with these rebels. It's going to alienate the British. We're not ready to go to war with them. And and the father-in-law is saying, this is just a terrible idea. This is not good for your career at all, and don't do this. Now, he's recruited by Silas Deane, who's an American agent looking for, kind of a talent spotter to get people over to go over to America to help the Continental Army. And Silas Deane says, well, we'll make you a major general, but they really can't help him get to America or anything like that. They don't have any resources. But that's remember, his first superpower. Lafayette rounds up a dozen or so people who want to go on this American adventure, and he buys a ship. So he buys his own ship to go to America. He spent a lot of money. And when he gets to Philadelphia, Congress is getting fed up with many of the foreign officers who have been recruited. What do we got next? Oh, there's Louis XV. Okay, good. Go back. In Philadelphia, Congress is getting fed up with many of the foreign officers who have been recruited. And they come demanding exorbitant salaries. They can't speak English. They're arrogant, and it's like they're tired of it. It was thought to be a great idea. Get these foreign officers who know something about fighting contemporary warfare, because there's not a lot of Americans who are available for that. So Lafayette is kind of, when Lafayette finally gets to Philadelphia after a lot of difficulty, he's kind of snubbed along with the people he's worth. But again, this is where the other superpower comes in. People who are knowledgeable about the French court realize how influential Lafayette is, and they say, you got to take care of this person. He he can help us get aid from France. So they send him to George Washington, and they say, look, this kid is influential. You got to take care of him, make him feel important, try not to get him killed. And Lafayette is hoping to get a division to command, but it's like, no. Washington says no, and he's very humble. And the other thing that is important in this relationship, which will develop over time, is Lafayette lost his father when he was 2 years old. He's raised without a father, and George Washington does not have a son of his own. He has stepkids, but he doesn't have his own son. And there really is this father-son bond that's formed between Lafayette and Washington. Ultimately, Lafayette will go ahead. Let's see what we got next. Oh, Lafayette isn't supposed to really be involved in the fighting so much, but at the Battle of Brandywine, there's a panic, and he rallies the troops, and he prevents things from being a total disaster, and he gets wounded. Washington says to the surgeon, I want you to treat him like he's my son, and he turns out to be actually a very effective leader, and Washington comes to rely on him to actually lead troops, even though he's 19 years old. Now, he does use one of his superpowers here. For example, he commanded a light infantry division, and he bought swords for all the NCOs and officers. So not only did he lead the division, he equipped it. At any rate, we'll go through this quickly. So there ends up being a treaty between the United States. France recognizes the United States and sends a tremendous amount of aid. And Lafayette, go ahead. Lafayette serves as a liaison between Rochambeau. Lafayette goes back to France to help encourage this aid, and then comes back ahead of everybody else. He wants to command the French troops, and they say, "No, I don't think so. You're 21. We're not gonna." But he serves as a valuable liaison with Rochambeau, who's in command of the French troops, and he will command an American division. He'll continue to serve as an American major general, and he'll command a division at the Battle of Yorktown, and it'll be critical in kind of finally nailing Cornwallis. And that was thanks largely to French naval power. And go ahead. To go quickly through the interim after he's left the United States. When the French Revolution comes along, he's kind of on the liberal side. He and Thomas Jefferson collaborate in writing the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen. Which is still a part of the French Constitution, I understand. Go ahead. However, the French Revolution doesn't go that well for Lafayette. He's doing well at first, but he believes that France should become a constitutional monarch. He believes the republic is the ideal form of government, but it's not going to work for France, that a constitutional monarchy is ideal. And that's why everybody hates him, because both the people who are more radical and the people who are conservative. All these countries gang up on. Everybody's very disturbed about what the French are doing. So the French are being invaded. They're defending themselves. Lafayette is serving with troops on the front, and he gets he gets the word he's supposed to come back to Paris, and he knows that that's not good. So he leaves, and he's captured by the Austrians, who imprison him for 5 years. Go ahead. Adrienne eventually begs her way into saying, I have to visit my husband, and the people running the show in Austria say, okay, but if you go in that prison, you're not coming out. And so she's in prison with him for 2 years with their daughters. He eventually will get freed thanks to Napoleon. George Washington Lafayette, his son, is staying with George Washington. So that works out well. Go ahead. So at any rate, that's who's coming to America, is this superhero who had all this after he was in America, he had all this hardship. Now he's coming back, and we're supposed to be thanking him for what he did for us, and we've been able to take care of ourselves since. Go ahead. So the election of 1824 is extremely controversial. We've got 5 candidates: John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun, and William H. Crawford. I can never remember him. He drops out. He drops out pretty early. Extremely bitter election, very vitriolic, and there's a way in which Lafayette, being here during that period, has a calming effect. Part of it is the newspapers only have so many column inches they can work with, and they have to keep track of where Lafayette is and publish stories about it. So it cuts down a little bit on the vitriol in the newspapers, and it's something that everybody can agree on, and it creates this this feeling of there's some sort of unity there. Sarah Vowell. Oh, let's see. Who's next? What do we got next? Oh, no, go back. I'm sorry. I already showed you Sarah Vowell's book before, Lafayette in the Somewhat United States. I really recommend it. It was written, it's about 10 or 15 years ago, and she has this technique where she goes back and forth between contemporary events as she's visiting these historic places and what was going on then. It's very well done, and when she talks about why she decided to write about Lafayette, because she likes to show the relevance of history to to what's going on contemporarily. And the thing that drew me to Lafayette as a subject, that he was that rare object of agreement in the ironically named United States, kept me coming back to why that made him unique. Namely, that we the people have never agreed on much of anything, other than a bipartisan consensus on barbecue and Meryl Streep, plus that time in 1942 when everyone from Bing Crosby to Oregonian school children heeded FDR's call to scrounge up rubber for the war effort. Disunity is the through line in the national plot, not necessarily as a failing, but as a free people's privilege. And thanks to Lafayette and his cohorts in Washington's army, plus the King of France and his navy, not to mention the founding dreamers who clearly did not think through what happens every time one citizen's pursuit of happiness infuriates his neighbors, getting on each other's nerves is all right. Now, in Lafayette in America, I've been told I mispronounced this guy's name. It's Levasseur. Okay, he was Lafayette's secretary, and he wrote an account of Lafayette's tour of the United States. It's and it was also a little bit of a travelogue saying what things are like in the United States. It was written for people in France. Alan Hoffman, who's the president of the American Friends of Lafayette, translated it about 20 years ago, and it's in its third printing. He was observing what happened in the election, and you all know this, but I'll just repeat it. The 1824 election ended up going into the House of Representatives because nobody got the enough electoral votes. And Henry Clay threw his support to John Quincy Adams, who got the election, and then John Quincy Adams made Henry Clay the Secretary of State. And the Jackson people said that was a corrupt bargain, and it was very tense. And there had been talk among the Jackson supporters that if this happens, we're gonna do something. There's going to be a plot. It was a concern, and after the election, Levasseur asked some Jackson supporters, "It's like, so what happened?" And one of them says, "We were indeed very busy shouting, but our adversaries did not take account of it, and they were right. They have judged us better than we would have wanted them to." Now that the law has spoken, we have only to obey it. We will second Adams with the same zeal as if we had supported him. But at the same time, we will shine a light on his administration, and according to whether it will be good or bad, we will defend or attack it. 4 years are passed very soon. And the consequences of a bad election are very easy to repair. Yes, I said to him, easier than the consequences of legitimacy and heredity. So that's it. Oh no, I'm sorry. The local color. I apologize. This is just for you. This is just for you guys. Now, one of the things I'd been talking about was how it was such a big event in people's lives, Lafayette's visit. And this is a book that's in this library, and it's pictures of prominent women of Lancaster. And what it will have, it has their name and when they were born and when they died, okay? And that's the way it is for all the pictures, just that thing below. So here's Harriet Spaulding, and she was born in 1815, died on May 26, 1897. And almost all the entries in the book are just like that, just that. But in her case, they add, she shook hands with Lafayette. Now, nobody else in the book did anything. So it really shows what an impression it made. And it made a particular impression in Lancaster. Go ahead, next one. Because in Lancaster, in 1912, they put on a pageant, and it was an extremely elaborate affair. I mean, it was choreographed. A very large audience. I mean, somebody spent some money making this thing happen. Probably one of the Thayers, So, but it was this really great pageant that they put in, and they wanted to show 5 events from Lancaster's history. And they show like, well, this is what it was like in England when we came over, and here's this thing where we talked to the natives and they gave us all this land, and then here's this incident where the natives decided they regretted giving us all this land, where Mary Rawlinson, and that's where Mary Rawlinson is taken. And I didn't know all this until I came up to Lancaster and to study Lafayette's visit. About her captivity narrative is like the first of that genre and and then they had the Minutemen, and the only event they had from the 19th century was Lafayette's visit. Right out there. Lafayette was right out there, and they're redoing this. I mean, you hear about an hour, give or take. Go ahead. And that sign is still here. And that sign was made up as a duplicate of the sign that I think had been on the church. I'm sorry if you can't read it, and I didn't note it. But and the original sign that was on the church is also here in this library. So,
What does it say?
oh, welcome Lafayette. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have. I should have written it down. But if you talk to the librarians, maybe one of them will show it to you sometime. Yeah, the duplicate, right? The 1912 duplicate, not they have the 1912 duplicate and the 1824 original.
Probably weather permitting.
Yeah, there is that. But by the way, there was a mention that it was going to be out on the event was going to be out on the common, but I believe it's actually going to be in the church, right? Or
On September 3rd?
yeah, on
My
September.
understanding is too, but
Yeah,
in the church.
yeah. Okay, and what else we have? Oh, okay. There's the Saraval. Okay. So, thank you very much.